Don't it make you wanna rock and roll all night long? Mohammed's radio.
So last time we talked about the journey that Zevon went on to get his foot in the door in the music industry. There were pitfalls along the way, but it ultimately led to a promising debut that caught the attention of some pretty big names in the business at the time. And despite rather lackluster sales, the self-titled album got rave reviews from music critics, and there was genuine interest to see how he was going to follow up that release. So after getting back from a tour with Jackson Browne to promote the Blue album, Zevon and Browne hit the studio again to record his sophomore album under Asylum Records. And this is the big one, yielding him what would end up being the biggest hit of his career, and the song that to this day, even if you bring it up to non-Zevon fans, they will probably know this song. I am of course talking about Werewolves of London. There's a lot to talk about with this left-field oddball novelty hit that was Werewolves of London. From its conception to its release and the songwriting and recording process, I actually found a lot of really interesting information on this song when I started research for this video. And it was rightly pointed out to me in the comments of my last video that I neglected to mention that after the split of the Everly Brothers in 1973, Zevon did briefly continue to work with each brother separately as solo artists. This is important now because the idea for this song actually came from Phil Everly, who had just watched a horror film from 1935 titled Werewolf of London, which, fun fact, this was the first Hollywood-produced film to ever feature a werewolf. Phil Everly thought it would be cool if Warren wrote a song with the same title and was able to create a dance craze out of it. The dance craze never really came to fruition, but it was referenced in the final verse of the song with Lon Chaney and Lon Chaney Jr. doing the Werewolves of London with the Queen of England of all people.
Well, I saw Lon Chaney walking with the Queen, doing the Werewolves of London. I saw Lon Chaney Jr. walking with the Queen, doing the Werewolves of London.
Now, at some point, Zevon got together with co-writers Leroy Marinell and Waddy Wachtel and just started going to town. Reportedly, it took them all of about 15 minutes to come up with the lyrics. They each alternated coming up with lyrical ideas, including the hairy-handed gent line, the pina colada at Trader Vic's. Wachtel was the one who came up with the idea to do that howl in the chorus. Leroy apparently came up with the main melody on guitar, which Zevon then translated to piano. And Zevon would sprinkle in several punchlines of his own into the lyrics, including the "I'd like to meet his tailor" and "his hair was perfect." And we cannot forget, of course, about the all-time classic opening lines of this song.
Saw a werewolf, Chinese bear in his hand. The streets of the sink of the river. He was looking for a place called Lee-Ho Foods. Wanna get a big dish of great chow mein.
It was a songwriting process that sounded as laid back and chaotic as the finished product came out. Zevon's wife at the time, Crystal Zevon, was there to write down most of the lyrics that the three bounced off each other, without whom most of this song probably would have been lost. But despite its hasty composition, it wouldn't be until 3 years later that Zevon would finally get into the studio to record this song. And according to Waddy Wachtel, the recording process of this song was long and arduous. He compared the recording of this song to the production hell that Apocalypse Now went through. Which, if you don't know anything about that, that's another video in and of itself. They apparently had difficulty nailing down the rhythm section of this song, so they eventually recruited Mick Fleetwood and John McVie from Fleetwood Mac to play the drum and bass sections of this song, and it reportedly took about 50 vocal takes to finally get it done. From what I heard, the majority of the budget for Excitable Boy pretty much just went into this one song, recording and re-recording. So at this point, the album is pretty much done, and the label decides they want to release Werewolves of London as the single. And Zevon and Wachtel disagreed. They felt that the song was too much of a novelty, it didn't fully represent the greatness of Zevon. Nevertheless, though, the label got their way, and Werewolves of London was released as the single of this album, and it became an overnight hit. Peaking at number 21 on Billboard, and it stayed in the top 40 for 6 consecutive weeks. It remains to this day Zevon's highest charting single by quite a lot. Zevon did not seem to love this song much either, in the same way that Kurt Cobain didn't really like Smells Like Teen Spirit. But to me, this song is a microcosm of everything that made Zevon so great. It has the imaginative concept with the werewolves just roaming around London, to the sardonic social commentary at the end where a group of people can just commit a series of brutal murders and still get a dance craze named after them. And just the cavalier approach to death that Zevon always had is present on this song as well, by responding to the warnings he gets of getting his lungs ripped out with remarks of how well dressed the werewolves are. It encapsulates everything Zevon was and distills it down to its essence, and it created this lightning in a bottle that finally broke Zevon out of that box that he had been stuck in and got him the mainstream attention that he had been working so hard to achieve at that point. So now, with more eyes on him and expectations starting to rise, let's see how the album turned out. The rest of this album is absolutely outstanding. I mentioned Reckless Abandon in the last video. Well, this album is the peak of what I was talking about when I said that. This album just barrels forward with an unstoppable force, like a boulder rolling down a hill, flattening anything that stands in its way. Waddy Wachtel, in addition to being a co-writer on Werewolves of London, was also the co-producer for this album, and he was determined to make this the album that broke Zevon into the mainstream, which explains, I think, why this album sounds a lot more upbeat and doo-woppy than anything you heard on the Blue album. These songs are definitely easier to dance to and have a much catchier tune to it. The dry humor and sarcastic cynicism is still present on this album, but it's injected with a lot more levity than the self-titled debut, more like a hearty chuckle rather than a passive-aggressive under-his-breath remark. Best example of this can be found on the title track itself. Unexcitable Boy, Warren depicts some pretty incredibly dark and disturbing imagery over an instrumental that sounds like something that belongs in a Charlie Chaplin film.
And he dug up a grave and built a cage with her bones. Excitable boy, they all say.
I dug up her grave and built a cage with her bones. Ooh, ah, ooh, excitable boy. I do really love the jazzy ragtime elements of this song, as well as the saxophone solos in lieu of a vocal hook. Sick licks, bro. Excitable Boy is one of a few examples of this album of Waddy Wachtel trying to coat Zevon's bitter taste with a more upbeat, sugary surface. And I think he does a great job of striking the balance between staying true to who Zevon was as an artist and making him palatable to a wider audience. The opening track, Johnny Strikes Up the Band, was an excellent choice for an opening track.
Ready, get ready. Rock steady. Johnny strikes up the band.
When Zevon and Wachtel objected to Werewolves being the single, they later said that this was one of the songs that they had in mind for the lead single. And I could see why they would want that. It is definitely one of the more accessible songs on this record. I feel like it loses a lot if you remove it from the context of the album, and it probably wouldn't have had the same amount of impact that Werewolves did. That said though, I love it as an opening track because it piques the audience interest with its smooth guitar riffs and its energetic lyrics about a popular, well-liked musician who brings joy to all of his listeners. I have heard theories that this song may be about the band Queen, and although I wasn't able to find anything to outright confirm this, pretty much every lyric sheet of this song I found spells the name Freddie the same way that Freddie Mercury spelled his name.
Coincidence? I think not!
But I suspect this song was designed to ease the audience into this album before immediately hitting them with the 1-2 punch of Rollin' the Headless Thompson Gunner and Excitable Boy. Speaking of Rollin' the Headless Thompson Gunner, let's talk about the man.
Hark! Rollin' the Headless Thompson Gunner. To this day that name sends chills down me timbers.
Wait, what?
I looked that lily-livered scallywag right in his eyes.
That doesn't really make sense because, the headless thing.
He took nearly half of my crew and I barely escaped with my ship.
So wait, you're saying you actually saw Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner?
Aye. Why do you think I have to wear this eye patch?
I just thought that you were crazy.
Nay. I was fortunate to escape even with me one good eye, and what's left of my soul can be picked by the gulls of the sea.
Captain, how much of my rum have you been drinking?
All of it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The Thompson Gunner. The Thompson Gunner.
I brought up Warren's skills as a storyteller in the last video, but I don't think it gets any better than Rollin' the Headless Thompson Gunner. This was the song where I feel like Warren truly developed that skill to its fullest potential. The level of detail that he is able to fit in this one 3-minute song is truly extraordinary. And I'm going to go more in depth on this later, but I will say for now that this song has some pretty great commentary about how the CIA used to handle foreign affairs back in Zevon's time. The CIA basically decides that they want this one guy dead, so they launch a black op into a country whose affairs that they have no business meddling in, and in the process accidentally create an even bigger threat against America, whose only purpose is to exact revenge against the people who forced him to radicalize into a crusade against American injustice. Thank God we don't do that anymore, right? The album kind of slows down a bit after Werewolves of London, and we get some more mellow songs like Accidentally Like a Martyr and Veracruz. Zevon once again flexes his classical piano background on these songs, as well as on the penultimate track, Tenderness on the Block. Accidentally Like a Martyr and Veracruz may be the slower songs on this album in terms of tempo, but they probably carry the most emotional weight out of any of the other songs here. Accidentally Like a Martyr is a tear-jerking love ballad about lost love, and it's got this feeling of melancholy resignation to it, where the writer is just kind of accepting the situation and going through the shoulda, woulda, coulda's that you would go through after something like this happens, trying to figure out ways that it went wrong and how he could have done things differently. It also could be interpreted as a song about religious devotion as well, where he compares the pain of losing a love interest to the feeling of getting crucified or persecuted. And it may also have implications about the dangers of putting a person or a religious figure at the center of your world and the devastation that occur when it doesn't go the way you had hoped. In between Accidentally Like a Martyr and Veracruz, you get kind of a palate-cleansing song in Nighttime in the Switching Yard. A song which I wasn't a huge fan of at first, but the more I listen to it, the more it really grows on you. But this song has an absolutely killer bass line and some pretty awesome vocal licks. But then you get right back into the heavy stuff with Veracruz, which in my opinion is probably the biggest gut punch on the whole record. This song was co-written and has backing vocals from Jorge Calderón, one of Zevon's closest friends and most frequent collaborators throughout his career. And this song is about the United States occupation of the Mexican port city Veracruz in 1914, and it's told from the point of view of a local Mexican family trying to flee the city as the American forces can be heard in the distance descending upon their home. And I mentioned Werewolves of London having the best opening lines. This song might be a close second.
I heard Woodrow Wilson's guns. I heard Maria crying.
That is so impactful. In just 2 lines, it encapsulates the sorrow, fear, and betrayal of knowing that armed forces from a neighboring country is coming after them. And the fact that it specifically names President Woodrow Wilson puts the entirety of the blame squarely on the shoulders of the highest level of American government. It has a lot more impact to it than if you just said, I heard some random American soldier's guns. Also, the Spanish vocals sung by Jorge Calderón add another layer of devastation to this song if you translate them.
Aquel día yo juré, hacia el puerto volveré, aunque el destino cambió mi vida, en Veracruz moriré. Aquel día yo juré.
Veracruz is also one of the strongest vocal performances on this album in my opinion, as is Tenderness on the Block, which is the next song after it. And on a side note, I think Zevon is massively underrated as a singer. People often talk about his expertise as an instrumentalist and his songwriting prowess, and rightfully so, but it's not like he was a talented songwriter who couldn't sing. He had some pretty impressive pipes back in the day. A couple years ago, I found a live recording of Warren Zevon singing Hasten Down the Wind from the Blue album, and I was blown away at how much power he had in his voice. It was an amazing performance, and he just belted this song like there was no tomorrow. And yeah, Zevon's voice did get weaker as he got older and his health started to decline, but overall I think he was pretty underrated as a singer. Anyways, back to Tenderness on the Block. This song is a nice breather from all the heavy topics that Zevon had tackled from the preceding tracks on this record. If you look at it through the lenses of criticizing the American lifestyle, you could say that it's a cautionary tale for fathers all across the country to not be so controlling of their daughters and to let them live their lives, have their own experiences, and learn from their own mistakes. The song also ends with the daughter sounding like she goes through her first heartbreak as she becomes wise to all the crap that's out there in the world. There could be darker implications to exactly how she came to this realization, but even with that, this song still ends with a glimmer of optimism that the child will be okay and that those heartbreaks are just the price of growing up. It's a sweet song, and it's probably one of the more wholesome songs that Zevon ever wrote. Then we get to the closing track of this album, Lawyers, Guns, and Money. This is another song that would make a pretty great movie, but as opposed to Rollin' the Headless Thompson Gunner, which would probably fall under the horror thriller genre, this song would fall closer to the dark comedy side of things. I actually found out some pretty interesting things about this song too. I read multiple sources that Zevon himself explained that this song was based on a true story where he and his manager were out partying in Mexico, and they got into a bit of a hairy situation where apparently their cab driver got into some kind of altercation, and Zevon's manager called someone up and told them to send lawyers, to which Zevon interjected to also send guns and money. There were a bunch of other accounts too that I found of how this song was inspired, but that's the only story that I found that was backed up by multiple sources, so I'm just gonna go with that.
Hiding in Honduras, I'm a desperate man.
There's also theories out there that this line is a reference to short story author Will Porter, who embezzled $5,000 from a bank and then fled to Honduras. What I really like about this song is the sense of urgency it has to it. Like, the whole song just feels so frantic and chaotic. And if you look at this also from the perspective of criticizing aspects of the American experience, which seems to be a running theme that we're noticing on this album at this point, you could easily make the case that this song is a commentary and possibly a cautionary tale of being able to engage in dangerous and possibly illegal behavior and being able to weasel your way out of it as long as you have enough money, lawyers, and guns to get off scot-free. It's a good microcosm of this whole album. It's chaotic, it's wild, but it has a point to it. It would be easy to listen to this album and just think that it's another wild and reckless rock album from an artist who is very much in the fast lane at this point in his career. There's definitely a method behind the madness here. There's a lot to uncover thematically on this record if you go beyond the abrasive and high-octane exterior. Like I said, every song on this album has a deeper message to it, and it's all connected by the running theme of criticizing the American lifestyle, whether it's tackling larger-scale issues like two major foreign affair fuck-ups in Roland and Veracruz, to criticizing more specific elements of American culture like on Werewolves or the religious themes on Accidentally Like a Martyr. I mean, hell, I didn't even mention that the title track is basically just a broad commentary on the American mental health system, where we pretty consistently ignore blatantly obvious warning signs of problematic behavior, neglect to give them the help that they need right then and there, then act surprised when they finally snap and act out on their violent impulses and wonder how we never saw it coming. Thank God we don't do that anymore, right? I'm trying to be careful because I don't want this series to just be about picking what I think is the best Warren Zevon album, but I do think that this album is the peak of what Zevon was capable of as an artist. Everything Zevon did well on the Blue album is present on this record, but it's way more refined, and the potential that he showed on the debut album feels fully realized here. The instrumental compositions are great, the lyrics are sharp, witty, and venomous, and it contains probably the most poignant social commentary that Zevon would ever write. I listened to this album so many times, and every time I listen to it, I find something new that I didn't notice before. It's the Zevon album that I think most rewards repeated listens, and if you're a die-hard Zevon fan, I probably don't even need to tell you to go listen to this album, but I will tell you to go listen to it again, because you may be surprised by what jumps out at you the next time you listen to it. Now, you would think that with this album gaining the notoriety that it got with Werewolves of London and other songs like Rollin' the Headless Thompson Gunner and Nighttime in the Switching Yard becoming kind of sleeper hits, that Zevon had firmly established himself as a legitimate rock star. However, the success of Excitable Boy did come at a cost. Not long after the release of this album, Zevon checked himself into rehab for alcoholism, and after a stay in treatment, Zevon went back to the studio and recorded the first album of his newfound sobriety. Would Zevon be able to capitalize on the momentum of Excitable Boy? Could Zevon maintain the same high level of energy and quality without being fueled by the alcohol? And most importantly, could Zevon remain on the wagon and stay sober? Stay tuned for part 3 to find out.
He's a shooter like me. GD's a shooter. GD's a shooter on the side. GD's a shooter.
Hey guys, just wanted to interject at the end of this video. The video's over, so if you want to click off at this point, that's fine. I just wanted to give you a quick update here. So, first off, I want to say thank you so much for the people who supported the first video of this series. It got a ton of views, more than I was expecting, to be honest, and it actually grew my subscriber count very significantly as well. That I think it was the most subscribers I had ever gotten in a single day since I've been doing this, which is awesome. So I just want to thank you guys so much for that. I'm not doing this for the subscribers or the clout or anything. I'm doing this because I love Warren and I want to talk about him on this channel. But the fact that the video where I talk about Warren Zevon, one of my all-time favorite musicians and artist who has meant a lot to me over the years. The fact that that video was the one that maybe my best performing video on this whole channel, outside of maybe my top 10 videos, the fact that that's the video that got me all those extra subscribers and got me all those views, like, that makes me so happy, like, I can't even describe it. So thank you so much for that. I just wanted to say that. And also I want to say part 3 is probably going to take a little while longer. I've got a lot going on in my life right now. I'm going through a move. I'm going to be moving at the end of this month here. And I'm also doing a community theater show that's going to be taking up pretty much all of my free time outside of my regular full-time job. That's going to be taking time away that I would be spending making videos, so I don't want to give a timeline necessarily on when part 3 is going to come out. I'm going to try to get it out as soon as I possibly can, but I just wanted to set the expectation that it's probably going to take a little while longer, and I hope you'll be patient with me. But thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate the support that this series has gotten so far, and I can't wait to continue this. So thank you again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
They need to shoot her.